Hi, welcome to Elizabeth Reads. We are reading A Place Called Perfect. We are on Chapter 18, The Ghost Estate. Ghosts? Boy nodded. I heard that the man who developed the estate was murdered before he could finish it because he tried to build on the land. It's right next to the graveyard, and there's lots of dark stories about that place. Some people whisper that he built on old, forgotten graves, and the spirits rose up to punish him. That's why it's supposed to be bad luck to come here. Violet quivered. Is that why I felt so sad in the graveyard, and why you heard those voices, Boy? Was it the ghosts? Boy shrugged. I'm just telling you what I know, Violet. Maybe it was ghosts, if you believe in that sort of thing. Dad says there's no such thing whenever I get scared. He believes in science and says that things need proof, and there's no proof for ghosts, Violet stammered as confidently as she could. Well then, I'm sure it's not true. It's probably just stories, Boy said reassuringly. Anyway, look, he pointed to the path that was worn down to the estate. People obviously walk this way. The wind picked up and thunder boomed overhead. Violet jumped. It's okay, Violet. Like you said, there's no such thing as ghosts, and George must have come this way. Don't you want to find your dad? Boy looked straight at her. Come on. Without a word, Violet and Boy crept down the other side of the hill. They just stepped onto the cement footpath when a huge clatter echoed through the empty estate. Boy grabbed her arm and they ran for cover behind a garden wall attached to the house beside them. It's just one of the fences. The steel makes a lot of noise. The wind must have blown it over, Boy panted, gathering his breath. They were about to move when Violet suddenly ducked back down, pulling Boy with her. There's something inside the house, she whispered. Something moved, I swear. She crawled quickly across the garden and ducked under the sill of the main window. What are you doing? Boy whispered, ducking down beside her. Going to have a look, she said. I got a strange feeling. Holding on to the edge of the sill, she inched herself up to peer through the window. A red bulb hung in the center of a room, turning the walls blood-colored. Rows and rows of small potted plants covered the cement floor. They were just like the plants she'd seen growing on the green, except they were smaller. Boy tugged on her leg. What? Do you see anything? I'm not sure, she whispered, unable to look away. The potted plants all had their heads turned toward the red light bulb, as though they were soaking in its warmth. The translucent petaled flower heads were supported by pulsing red stems that looked like veins rooted into pots of dark clotted clay. The pots bubbled over with a gruesome red liquid that seeped across the floor. It looked as if 1,000,000 people had been murdered in the room. Small plastic tubes in the side of each pot connected to a large barrel of thick liquid in the corner of the space. It seemed to be feeding the masses. She stared into the room, trying to make sense of the scene, when very slowly all the plants turned their heads towards the window and stared back at her. She ducked down, her heart thumping. What is it, Violet? You're white as a sheet. It's what? It's eyes. Lots of eyes staring at me. Pots and pots of eyes. They're growing eyes, Boy. Violet shuddered. She wasn't making any sense. Boy pulled himself up for a look. It's eyes, he gasped, darting back down to her side. I don't understand. I thought they were plants. Eyes? Why would anybody be growing eyes? They sat under the window ledge in silence, thinking frantically. An idea was forming in Violet's mind, but she couldn't quite grasp it. The Archers, Perfect, the glasses, her dad. My dad, she said, suddenly sitting upright, her bravery returning. My dad is here, Boy. He's in this estate. I know he is. Shh, Boy whispered, looking around to make sure no one was about. What makes you think that? It's the eyes. The Archers asked him to come and work here because he'd won an award. I remember reading about it in I Spy magazine. I thought his whole idea was disgusting, but it had something to do with growing eyes for transplants. But why would the Archers want eye transplants? And so many. All I know is that Dad is here. He has to be, and we have to rescue him. Please, Boy, will you help me check the estate? You take that side and I'll take this one. Really? On your own? Yes, I'm not a girly girl, you know. Well, you are, actually, Boy smiled, then turned and crawled back across the garden. Violet shivered as he dashed for the other side of the estate. She was on her own. She shook off her fear. Her dad was here, and she had to help him. Quickly, she crawled across the garden and over the low dividing wall to the house next door. Inside looked just the same as the last house. There were rows and rows of eye plants. Ugh, it was disgusting. For a moment she thought she was going to vomit. Bile raced up her throat, stopping short of her mouth. She steadied herself against the windowsill. She was here to find her dad. She had to concentrate. At the third house, a strange noise met her ears, and as she peeked through the window, her skin rose in goosebumps, sending a shiver right through her shoulders. Watchers lay all over the floor, snoring their night away. The house was packed with them. They were all fully dressed, as if they'd collapsed exhausted where they stood. Some of their boots were caked in mud, and dark clumps of clay were dotted over the concrete floor. Sets of muddy footprints traced from the door of the house across the tarmac road to the green full of plants. The watchers must be working there. She had to tell Boy. She was about to move when suddenly the front door of the house opened. Violet pushed her body against the wall under the windowsill and stayed deadly still, her pulse racing. George Archer strode out across the green. She could see Boy on his knees, peering through a window in one of the houses opposite. He was completely oblivious as the taller brother marched towards him. All the air escaped Violet's lungs, and she couldn't breathe. Her friend was caught. There was no way out. Clambering to her feet as quietly as possible, she followed after the taller twin at a safe distance, all the while searching her brain for a way to save Boy. If she screamed or threw something, they'd both get caught, and that wouldn't help anyone. George was heading straight for Boy now. Her friend turned, and the huge man was upon him. He pulled something from his pocket and sprayed Boy in the face. Within seconds, he'd collapsed, unconscious. George Archer threw Boy's limp body over his shoulder and turned. Violet watched as he walked to the house next door and pushed open the door. The two disappeared inside, and Violet quickly sprinted towards the house. Her legs were shaking, but she had to be strong. She couldn't see anything in the front room, so she raced around the back of the house just in time to see George carry Boy up the stairs, his legs dangling loosely down the giant's back. A few moments later, George returned downstairs alone and disappeared out the front door. She raced round after him, but the willowy twin was already striding across to the house with the sleeping watchers on the other side of the green. Violet wasn't sure what George Archer had done to Boy, but she knew her friend was in trouble, deep trouble, and she was the only one who could save him. That's the end of chapter 18. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.